I want to talk about Frostpunk 2. You're probably not surprised if you've been watching this channel for a long time. You know I love the original game, and I was really looking forward to the sequel here. It was like my most anticipated thing. I did the before you buy video on GameRanks, and I'm pretty positive on Frostpunk 2. I genuinely really like it, but it is a really interesting title. There is some division in the player base. Look at Steam reviews and stuff like that. The game isn't a disaster by any means. There is nothing wrong with it, but people are feeling differently about it, especially people coming to this game after being in love with the first game. Frostpunk 2 is a really interesting thing. I've been playing it more. I played it over the last weekend. I'm still really enjoying my time with it, and I just find it a very interesting game, specifically because in the world of remakes and recycled IP and endless sequels and stuff like that, 11-bit studios here didn't decide to just toss out a Frostpunk 2 sequel that builds on the first one. No, they just decided to try and do something totally different in a lot of ways. They took a lot of the core ethos, like the core elements of Frostpunk, but did a different thing with it. And I think that on the one hand, you know, if you just really love the first one and wanted more of that, this is where Frostpunk 2 can be disappointing. Instead of a very intimate, small, circular city builder, the new one goes a little bit more civilization, and it's more like building a survival empire instead of a survival city. You lose some of that intimacy, and I can totally see where people can feel let down by this new game trying something new. But the way I look at it personally is that I love the first Frostpunk, and I didn't really know how you would improve upon that. When they announced a sequel, I was like, cool, but what's it gonna be? Just more? And then now, this game, Frostpunk 2, is something different. It was really interesting for me because I went into it totally blind. I was looking forward to the game, but I didn't really follow news. I didn't do any previews on it. I didn't even read or watch any previews on it, so I didn't know what to expect jumping in. And very quickly, I was like, whoa, this is a much bigger game in a lot of ways. But it doesn't feel like the original. So I absolutely commend them. I think, again, in a world where just sequels are just shuffled out, I really commend them for doing something kind of bold and saying, no, we did that. Let's try something different with the ideas and the world of Frostpunk. And they did. I think to a successful degree. Some people may say, that's cool, but that's not what I wanted. And I totally get that. I do think ultimately, I still like the first one more. I like that smaller scale, intimate thing. It felt very unique. The new game is still unique, but it also reminds me of a lot of other games I like to play. Like I already mentioned Civ. So there's that. But I think I like the evolution of Frostpunk 1 to Frostpunk 2. And I think I mentioned this on the Friends Per Second podcast or somewhere. But essentially where in the first Frostpunk, you learn that it sucks to be a leader. It really, really sucks to be like the mayor. Like every decision you make, no matter what decision you make, even if you feel it's the right decision, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Every decision has a good effect and a negative effect. Everything is going to fuck up something. Now, that was from the mayoral level. Now with Frostpunk 2, it's like from the presidential or prime minister level, where in Frostpunk 1, we learned that it sucks to be a leader, it sucks to be a mayor. In Frostpunk 2, we learned that it sucks to be a president or a prime minister or whatever. And like, while Frostpunk 2 is focused on building larger cities, you're not picking every individual building, which I miss, but you're plotting down districts. I still really like seeing a city just grow and take over a map and just be all like messed up and cluttered and chaotic, like a real city. I find that stuff interesting. But like where you miss some of that little intimate granular stuff, you make up for it. And I think the political elements here, I think the political elements are really cool because it's kind of like a politics system of a Civ or a Grand Strategy 4X, whatever you want to call it, mixed with factions of an RPG, because you have all these different types of citizens that can come in your games. You'll see some of them during the campaign. You can get other ones in the Utopia mode, and they all have their own wants, needs, beliefs. Some are religious fanatics, some are survivalists, some are just workers, some are neutral, some are naturalists. There's all these different varying world perspectives, political perspectives, perspectives, and they all represent different levels of the population. You might have a really, really loud minority of people that want a lot but take up a very small percentage of the population. So those percentages and everything, it all comes to mind when you're having these council meetings. There's a meeting every so often in the game, and then there's a recess period where you can't make new decisions, and then back to council where you have to declare laws. And then there's a whole voting system. So you are essentially a character in this game, even more than the first Frostpunk, which is interesting. And you have kind of an approval level. Alongside that, you also have these faction levels, right? So you're juggling how much the citizens like you, but also each of the factions, how much they like you. And where it really comes into place is with doing these council votes and bringing things to law, making these decisions. These laws, in a lot of ways, are like the hard decisions you'd make in the original Frostpunk, but now you have to put them to a vote. And because of your faction affinity and everything like that, something that you may want to vote for, not all of the factions are on board with that line of thinking. So you need to work to get more votes, to guarantee more votes before you actually put it to a vote so that it gets passed and it doesn't get rejected. So with that comes a lot of the political tomfoolery and how like you can put your foot in your own mouth or your own ass and really screw things up, and things can start to really pile onto you because, especially on the harder difficulties and how challenging it gets, you're going to be desperate to pass some of these laws because you have people begging you for changes. It's actively affecting, the rate of disease, the production of food, shit like that in your world. And all these factions you need to help get votes from, you need to go onto them individually and make promises and things and guarantees for them so they will vote for you now. It was like, yeah, like give me votes on this thing, and then later on down the line, I'll make sure to develop this technology tree, or I'll make sure to pass this law. So it's always going to end up increasingly putting you in a deeper pickle, in a dicier situation. And I really like that because it still has the feeling of the original Frostpunk where everything is dreary. Every decision is still going to screw you over one way or another, but now it's from more of a politicized sense. So I miss just how cold and dour the original game was, but I like that first game challenged how I thought and how I made decisions, and Frostpunk 2 continues to do that. That's a core element from Frostpunk that they carried over that I liked. They essentially went from a survival game that is like a city to a survival thing that is kind of like a civilization. And it's been genuinely really working for me. I also just like games where I build a city or I build an empire. And I like seeing what was just a snowy landscape slowly have a weird city, like its tendrils creeping out and covering the land and really essentially polluting the land. You are like less worried from a hyper level, the level of heat for each building or each district and like pollution, stuff like that. It's still there, but you do miss some of those elements. But again, it's all about a grander scale here. And essentially at a point, managing multiple cities at once. From a technical standpoint, I think that's like really impressive, right? You're zooming out, you're jumping over to another city, you're sending workers, goods, bodies, resources back and forth, you're managing trade routes and stuff like that. That's where I'm just like, wow, this shit is a lot. But like with the different factions and stuff and like all the decisions that comes up and like the politics and stuff, it's still got the thing how in the first game, the joke is like the children, they yearn for the mines. You're sending them to the mines because you need coal. You got to keep this city warm, right? In this, you're still coming into situations like that. And I really like how it works from a storytelling perspective because it results in things that you just wouldn't have foresaw. And that to me makes this a fun game to really just sit and watch play out and just see these scenarios pop up and just be amazed that like people came up with all this and all these combinations, right? So for me, I put a law in place that let people who were affected by frostbite, like losing limbs and stuff, we spent some government resources to be able to give those people new prosthetics, like a hook hand or a peg leg or something like that, and get those people back to work and keep things going, because that's the brutal reality of my little world I built. Along with that, at some point in the line, I had also like enacted a law that was like merit-based pay, where the more you work, the harder you work, the more overtime you work, the more your output is, you get paid more. But what I didn't realize, though, is that there would be tension. People would start getting pissed at other guys working that would have literal prosthetic hands or hooks for hands that were able to work harder and do more work. And then I'd have those people come to me and say, hey, that's not fair. I'm not getting paid enough because I don't have like freaking like robot arms because I didn't get frostbite. What is going on here? So it's little things like that that you just don't see coming, and then they pop up and you have to deal with them. It's unforeseen consequences. And I love that in terms of leadership, decision making. They nail it. That unpredictability is cool. Like even like the factions themselves. You might think one is your absolute buddy for a good chunk of your playthrough, where suddenly they become more demanding, or they really flip a switch on something they believe on, and it clashes. And then that presents new challenges. I like games like this for stuff like that, where I can sit and read a decision or read a presentation and I can be like, oh yeah, or nah, fuck that guy, this is crazy. Like that, those feelings are good. The fact that I get that feeling from a video game and making little choices, awesome. It also can get very challenging still. The resource management stuff here is a big focus, and it's not as exciting. I think it's a lot of a numbers game, and I think that's where like it's doing too much, and that's just not as exciting as a lot of the more intimate stuff, and especially compared to the first game. So again, I think that's what I'm going back and forth with here, is that like what I like about this game, and especially like in gaming conversation right now, really in any media, a thing has to be the best thing ever made or the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, where Frostpunk 2 is definitely an example. And you see like the types of player base for these types of games. It's very much a thing where it's like, oh, they did a different thing. This thing isn't for me. I don't know. I think around this title, like there has been some really healthy discussion about like what we want from these types of games and how developers approach sequels and stuff like that. And I think there is a lot to be learned from this. And Frostpunk 2 is not perfect. There's definitely things it needs to be added in. It needs some tweaks and fixes in terms of balancing and stuff like that. But it is 100% the type of game that I really like, and I can talk to another diehard Frostpunk fan that absolutely does not like it and can totally agree to disagree. I can totally see why. If anything, Frostpunk 2 has also made me want to go back and play Frostpunk 1, because now that I've had a lot of fun building expansive political empires and managing resources and charting the unknown depths of the Frostlands, I want to huddle around that generator again from the first game. I really want to focus on that moment-to-moment heat management and that brutal level of stress, the different type of stress than the flavor of Frostpunk 2. So I'm continuing to play Frostpunk 2. I still have like some playthroughs I want to get out of me, but I know at a point when things quiet down in terms of game releases, I'm looking forward to going back to Frostpunk 1. Both games, very unique, very different. In my opinion, they're both my special children, and I love them equally, but, well, maybe not equally. Like I said, I think I still like the first one more, but Frostpunk 2 is cool from how it carried over and made some ideas interesting. I know some of you guys are going to disagree with me, so I'd love to hear from you. Like I said, Steam reviews have had some really interesting insight into what people aren't enjoying about the game, so I want to know where you land. Did you go into Frostpunk 2 knowing what it was going to be, or were you like me? Did you go in totally blind? I wonder if that affected my opinion on it one way or the other. Like, I wonder if I went in knowing that it was different, how I would feel, or really how other people did. Because I was completely surprised, like, oh, this is different. Where some people might go, oh, this is different. So let me know where you fall on that scale. Thank you for letting me talk about this type of game. These types of games don't always do too well on my channel, but they are my absolute favorite. I love building cities, building worlds, building empires. I'm looking forward to trying more of Ara History Untold. Like, it's just like a lot of time for these types of games right now. There's another civilization coming, of course, so I'm eating good right now. But let's talk about Frostpunk 2 down in the comments. I definitely want to hear from you. If you like this video and you like hearing me just yap about stuff I like, stuff I find interesting, clicking the like button helps me out. I appreciate it. But I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me.